that there are two children, Cersei and Tyrion, playing in the field. After hours of fun, they return home to their father. Tyrion's face is clean from the rain, but Cersei has mud all over her forehead. Their father is just about to tell them to wash before dinner, but instead, he decides to have a little fun.
We have something important to discuss.
He tells them,
My children.
"Look at you."
Stop that. You're making me uncomfortable.
What do you mean?
"At least one of you has mud on your forehead." Then to his children's confusion, he asks, "Do you know if you have a muddy forehead?"
Yes.
Now, do you know if you have mud on your forehead?
Yes, Father.
How did Cersei know after her father's statement that she had mud on her forehead, while Tyrion did not? And how come Tyrion knew the answer only the second time the same question was asked? We will examine the scenario more closely, using an epistemic model of how these two characters updated their knowledge. Let C stand for Cersei, T for Tyrion, and MX for X is muddy. We begin with 4 worlds which capture all possible combinations of muddy and not muddy faces. Each world is accessible from all the other worlds because both agents have no information at this point regarding their own or the other's face, and thus both consider all combinations to be possible. We thus do not need to label the lines with specific agents. In reality, only Cersei is muddy. World 1 in our model represents the real world, but they do not know this yet. The first information that our two agents receive is the information regarding each other's face when Cersei and Tyrion's father tells them to look at each other. When Cersei and Tyrion see the other's face, they no longer consider possible the worlds which contradict what they see in reality. For Cersei, these are the worlds in which Tyrion is muddy, since she can see that Tyrion is not muddy. And for Tyrion, these are the worlds in which Cersei is not muddy, since he can see that Cersei is muddy. We eliminate lines that represent access of Cersei and Tyrion to these worlds. Note that although World 4 is no longer possible for Tyrion, knowing that Cersei is muddy, it is still possible for Cersei. Likewise, although World 2 is no longer possible for Cersei, knowing that Tyrion is not muddy, it is still possible for Tyrion. Now you may wonder about World 3, which contradicts what both of our agents see in reality. Why is this world not eliminated? Do we still need the C line between World 2 and World 3? Similarly, do we need the T line between World 3 and World 4? Well, it turns out we do. Remember, our agents do not know what the real world is. Tyrion thinks that either World 1 or World 2 capture the real situation. That is, either he is or he is not muddy. If he were muddy, then according to him, Cersei considers World 3 possible, since she can see Tyrion's face but not her own. And similarly for Cersei, Cersei thinks that either World 1 or World 4 capture the real situation. If she were not muddy, then according to her, Tyrion considers World 3 possible, since he can see Cersei's face but not his own. The second information that they receive is their father's announcement: at least one of you is muddy. Now, both Cersei and Tyrion no longer consider World 4 possible. Because this is a public announcement, both Cersei and Tyrion also know of each other that they no longer consider World 4 possible. We can thus erase World 4 in our model. Now, Cersei sees that Tyrion is not muddy, and since she knows at least one of them must be muddy, she understands that she herself must be muddy. That is, she is fully informed. Indeed, we see that the only C line from the real world has been removed, and so the only world accessible to Cersei is the real world. But is it the same for Tyrion? He knows that at least one of them has to be muddy, but seeing that Cersei is muddy, Tyrion thinks that Tyrion himself could be muddy or not muddy. So when the father asks, "Do you know if your face is muddy?" Cersei confidently says, yes, she knows, while Tyrion says, no, he doesn't know. Now, after hearing Cersei say that she knows she is muddy, Tyrion realizes that he himself must be clean. This is because if he were muddy, such as in World 2, Cersei should have been just as unsure as he was, considering both the possibilities of her being muddy and her being clean, visualized as the sea line which connects World 2 and 3. But since Cersei was not unsure, as she was certain that she was muddy, Tyrion can eliminate World 2. Both Cersei and Tyrion now know what the real situation is. Only one world, that is, the real world, remains. Imagine now a slightly different scenario. Cersei and Tyrion have been playing in the field, just like in the previous story, but this time they were more enthusiastic about their pretend fighting. They both return to their father with muddy faces. The situation unfolds like this. Look at you. At least one of you has mud on your forehead. Then to his children's confusion, he asks, "Do you know if you have a muddy face?" Then Cersei and Tyrion seem to understand something. The father asks again, "Now, do you know if you have a muddy face?"
Yes, Father.
How did the children get to know that they were both muddy? Let us observe closely Cersei and Tyrion's reasoning and how their knowledge gets updated. First, assuming that the two have no information whatsoever, that they did not even see each other's face yet. They consider all four situations possible, all four possible worlds. In reality, both Cersei and Tyrion are muddy. That is, World 1 in our model represents the real world, but they do not know this. Recall that we do not label the lines of specific agents because all agents consider all worlds possible from wherever they are. Now Tyrion and Cersei turn to look at each other and something changes. Cersei can clearly see that Tyrion is muddy, so she no longer considers possible World 3. For Tyrion too, he no longer has access to World 2 because he sees that Cersei is clearly muddy. For both Cersei and Tyrion, World 4 is no longer accessible from World 1 because they see that the other is muddy, so that they can rule out that both are not muddy. Not only that, but Cersei also knows that if the real world were World 2, it would then be impossible for her to consider a world where Tyrion is not muddy. So from World 2, she no longer has access to World 3 nor World 4. She also knows that if World 2 was the real world, Tyrion would see that Cersei is not muddy, and so he would not consider World 3 possible. The same is the case from Tyrion's perspective. With these knowledge updates, we modify the model by eliminating the relevant lines. We also label the lines to indicate accessibility by only one of the agents. Note that Cersei and Tyrion are only uncertain about their own state. This is why there is only one accessibility relation from one world to another per agent. It reflects that agents are uncertain about only two possibilities. You might wonder at this stage why we do not simply delete World 4. From the perspective of our real world, World 1, no agent considers World 4 possible after all. So why leave it in the model? Take Cersei's perspective. From World 1, she only has access to World 2, which reflects that she is only uncertain about whether both she and Tyrion are muddy or whether Tyrion is muddy, but she is not. She is only uncertain about her own state. For all that Cersei knows, Tyrion might see a clean face and therefore consider that both he and Cersei have clean faces. Thus, from the perspective of World 2, Cersei would not consider World 4 possible, but Tyrion would. Cersei considers it possible that Tyrion considers it possible that both of them are clean. Now let's examine the next knowledge update. The father says, "At least one of you is muddy." Now we do eliminate World 4. Why? Because now all agents know that Cersei or Tyrion is muddy. And since this statement is false in World 4, no agent would consider that world possible, wherever they are. We thus eliminate the world in which both Cersei and Tyrion are not muddy. Note that the statement, "At least one of you is muddy," is not new information to either of the agents, but does bring about a knowledge update by the very fact that it is publicly communicated. Still, both Cersei and Tyrion are unsure about their own state. Since the other person has a muddy face, this already satisfies the requirement that at least one of them is muddy. Cersei is therefore still undecided between World 1 and World 2, and Tyrion between World 1 and World 3. Thus, when the father asks them, "Do you know if your face is muddy?" both say,
No. Of that I'm innocent.
No.
This is when the situation gets interesting. By answering no, Cersei's and Tyrion's ignorance becomes, as it were, a public announcement. Even though it might not seem like it, both obtain new knowledge, namely that the other agent is also unsure about whether they are muddy. As a result, the agents can now reconsider the situation. Cersei knows that if she had a clean face, Tyrion would for sure have known that he must be the muddy one, because otherwise the statement that at least one of them is muddy would be false. Indeed, from World 2, he does not have access to a world in which he is not muddy. He would not consider other options possible. But Tyrion said that he did not know if he was muddy. The only way he would be unsure is if Cersei is muddy. The moment Cersei catches this, Cersei also realizes that Tyrion, who is in the exact same situation, is thinking the same. They both are muddy, and they both know that the other knows it. Now, those who watch Game of Thrones know that Cersei and Tyrion have another sibling, Jaime. In this happier parallel universe, not only do Cersei and Tyrion play together in the field, but Jaime comes back from the Starks to join them. How does our model look with 3 agents? Let us begin again with the agents having no knowledge. In our real world, World 1, only Cersei has a muddy face. That looks quite complicated. Now that there are 8 possible combinations, with each agent from each world having access to not only that world, but to another 7. But once the agents are able to see each other's faces, the model drastically simplifies itself. This is because each agent is now only unsure about the state of their own face. So, from any world they find themselves at, our agents have access to exactly 2 worlds which differ from each other only as far as their own state is concerned, whether they are muddy or not. They do know the state of the others. For visual clarity, the lines are coloured rather than labelled. The red representing Cersei, the blue representing Tyrion, the green representing Jaime. So for example, from the real world, World 1, Cersei considers only one other possibility, that is, a world where none of them is muddy. When the father now says, "At least one of you is muddy," World 8 is no longer a possibility for any of the agents and can be eliminated from the model. Cersei now knows she is muddy, since she sees that Tyrion and Jaime are clean. Thus she no longer has access to other worlds from the real world. She considers the real world as the only possibility. As we saw in the previous 2 children versions of the puzzle, the model not only captures what our agents know about whether they themselves or the others are muddy, it also captures what they think the others know or consider possible. For example, although Cersei does not consider a world in which Jaime is muddy possible, like World 5, for she sees that he is clean, Jaime does not know this, and so he considers it possible that Cersei considers it possible that he is muddy. In our model from World 1, Jaime has access to World 2, from which Cersei does have access to World 5. Since World 8 was the only world Cersei considered possible other than the real world, our model now predicts that Cersei knows that she is in World 1. Indeed, since Cersei can see that Tyrion and Jaime are clean, and since according to father, at least one of them is muddy, she must be the muddy one. Tyrion and Jaime, however, are still unsure, because the statement that at least one of children is muddy does not give them more information than what they already know, given they already see a muddy face, namely Cersei's. Things change when our agents make our knowledge explicit. When the father asks the question, "Do you know if your face is muddy?" Cersei answers, "Yes," and the other two answer, "No." But, just as we saw in the previous one clean variation of the puzzle, by hearing that Cersei knows whether she is muddy or not, Tyrion and Jaime realize that both of them must be clean, because the only way for Cersei to know is if she sees Tyrion and Jaime. Therefore, she has to be the muddy one. Let us explain this a bit more. Let us follow Jaime's reasoning. If he were muddy, then Cersei would see that and would not have learned anything new after the father told them that one of them is muddy. By reference to our model, if Jaime was in World 2, then Cersei would still not be able to distinguish between World 2 and World 5. Similarly for Tyrion, but since Cersei publicly announces that she knows whether she is muddy or not, Tyrion and Jaime now also know that Cersei knows, and there remains only one possible world. But what happens if both Cersei and Tyrion are muddy while Jaime is clean? As before, we begin by assuming that our agents are fully ignorant. They do know more when they see each other's faces. After the father's public announcement, "At least one of you is muddy," World 8 can be eliminated from the model. As we saw in the previous versions of the puzzle, the model not only captures what our agents know about whether they themselves or the others are muddy, it also captures what they think the others know or consider possible. For example, although Jaime does not consider possible a world like 6, in which Cersei is clean, since he can see that Cersei is muddy, Cersei does not know of herself that she is muddy, so she thinks that Jaime considers it possible that she is clean. Notice that, unlike the previous variation of the puzzle, where after the father's statement, Cersei immediately knew that she was the muddy one, no one can be sure of their own situation yet. Since there are two muddy children, and everyone sees at least one muddy face, the father's statement does not tell them something they do not already know. Looking at our model, every agent has access to one more world from the real world. So when the father asks, "Do you know if you have a muddy face?" all children answer no, as we would expect from what we see in the model. This is telling for Cersei and Tyrion. Cersei's public announcement that she does not know whether she is muddy or not allows Tyrion to infer that he is muddy, and the other way round. Let's follow Cersei's reasoning. If Cersei was clean, Tyrion would see this, and given that he sees Jaime as clean, he would have known that he is the muddy one. From World 4, Tyrion cannot access any other world. The same goes for Tyrion. He knows that Cersei knows that Jaime is clean. If Tyrion himself was clean, as in World 3, Cersei would have inferred that she is muddy. But since Cersei did not say that she knows whether she is muddy or not, Tyrion now knows that he is muddy. Cersei and Tyrion know that they are in World 1. The same, however, does not apply to Jaime. For Jaime, Worlds 1 and 2 are possible, and in both of these worlds, Cersei and Tyrion are still unsure about their own state. So, Cersei and Tyrion's public announcement gives Jaime no additional information other than what he can already see. Regardless of Jaime, now that Cersei and Tyrion know that they are both muddy, our model simplifies to only Jaime being the uncertain one. Only he considers a different possibility from the real world. When the father asks again, "Do you know if your face is muddy?" Cersei and Tyrion answer, "Yes," and Jaime answers, "No." But upon hearing the latest answer of the other two children, Jaime now also realizes that he is clean. This is because, if he was also muddy, Cersei and Tyrion would still be unsure. The very fact that Cersei and Tyrion know they are muddy tells Jaime that the world from which Cersei and Tyrion consider no other possibility, World 1, must be the real world.
So clever. Aren't you always so clever with your schemes and your plots?
Schemes and plots are the same thing.